The U.S. Navy just pulled off a move that stunned the world, catching the Sinaloa Cartel's $473 million drug fleet in the middle of the Caribbean. What was supposed to be a silent patrol turned into a full-blown naval showdown, and that left cartel commanders scrambling and entire smuggling routes wiped off the map. However, what happened next was unexpected. At 5:30 hours, the calm Caribbean erupted into chaos. Radar screens flared, voices cracked through static, and Coast Guard cutters snapped into attack formation. What was supposed to be a routine patrol suddenly turned historic. Across the horizon, small blips began to multiply, fast, erratic, and cutting straight into restricted waters. Within minutes, the tone shifted. These weren't fishermen. They were Sinaloa Cartel command vessels, escorting narco subs packed with nearly $500 million in drugs. The ocean, once calm, was now a battlefield. And this wasn't just a chase. It was about to become a turning point in America's war on cartels. Flares burst through the darkness as go-fast boats ripped across the waves, their engines screaming. Each boat carried armed crews, men trained, wired, and willing to die to outrun the law. But this time, the law didn't arrive in patrol boats. It came armed with destroyers, drones, and aircraft. Because this wasn't a Coast Guard chase anymore, it was the U.S. Navy, backed by DEA surveillance and Poseidon recon planes overhead. What began as a patrol had just escalated into one of the largest maritime counter-narcotics operations in history. And beneath the surface, something far more advanced was waiting to be exposed. This wasn't a smuggling ring. It was a floating army. Beneath the waves, custom-built narco-submarines glided silently, their hulls coated in radar-absorbing paint. Above them, go-fast boats cut through the black water like sharks, crewed by ex-soldiers and mercenaries armed with encrypted radios and satellite comms. Every route, every escape pattern had been drilled to perfection. For years, U.S. intelligence had whispered about a shadow navy, a Sinaloa fleet so advanced it could move tons of cocaine across oceans without a trace. That night, those whispers stopped being rumors and turned into coordinates on a radar screen. The data came fast and brutal. 76,000 pounds of narcotics, worth $473 million, enough for 23 million lethal doses. The mission parameters changed in an instant. This wasn't about surveillance anymore. It was about stopping a navy built on drugs before it vanished into the deep. But how do you stop an army at sea without starting a war? That answer came wrapped in one codename: Operation Pacific Viper. It sounded simple, almost clinical. But behind it was one of the most sophisticated maritime traps ever built. For 7 months, the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and DEA coordinated under deep silence, threading intelligence from satellites, signal intercepts, and human assets in Mexico's Pacific corridor. Their target wasn't a convoy. It was an empire on water. High above the Caribbean, P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft cut through the clouds, scanning for the faintest heat signatures, tiny glimmers that betrayed the cartel's narco-submarines hiding beneath the waves. Each sub was hand-built in jungle shipyards, engineered with carbon fiber plating and low-acoustic engines that mimicked marine noise. They could carry 6 tons of cocaine apiece and vanish in under a minute if spotted. On the surface, U.S. destroyers drifted silently, radars hot but weapons cold. The fleet looked asleep, but it wasn't. Beneath that calm hum, real-time surveillance grids linked every ship, drone, and aircraft in a single encrypted network. The Navy wasn't chasing smugglers anymore. It was waiting for them to make a mistake. Then, just before dawn, the radio crackled to life. Interdict, not destroy. It was the moment everyone had trained for. Every move from that second on had to be surgical, filmed, logged, and admissible in both U.S. and international courts. The operation wasn't just a show of force. It was proof that America could wage war within the rules. And then, chaos. The sea lit up like lightning. Flares arced across the horizon, painting the sky red and gold. Coast Guard cutters surged in, throttles wide open, while MH-60 Seahawk helicopters hovered low, their rotors thundering over black water. Within minutes, the cartel's encrypted radios went dead. The Sinaloa fleet, their crown jewel of maritime smuggling, was surrounded. But as the waves churned under the flashing lights, something even more symbolic was cutting through the darkness. A gray silhouette appeared on the horizon, massive, cold, and unstoppable. The USS Cole had entered the fight. For anyone who remembers the year 2000, that name still echoes. The Cole was the ship bombed by Al-Qaeda in Yemen's Aden Harbor, killing 17 American sailors. It had become a symbol of tragedy, a scar on U.S. naval history. But 25 years later, it returned, rebuilt and rearmed to hunt a new kind of enemy. And here's the twist of history. The ship that had once been the victim of terror was now hunting an organization legally designated as terrorists, the Sinaloa Cartel. When the cartel crews spotted it through binoculars, dread spread across every deck. To them, the Cole wasn't just another destroyer, it was a ghost. The same ship that had survived a suicide bombing now bore down on them, bristling with weapons and unflinching in its mission. The Cole was no ordinary vessel. It carried the Aegis combat system, the most advanced radar and missile coordination array in naval history. Its AN/SPY-1 radar could detect a drone-sized object 200 miles away. Its SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors could eliminate incoming missiles, aircraft, or, in this case, any vessel that refused to comply. The Caribbean had become a chessboard of precision, and the Cole was the queen in play. And somewhere deep inside that steel hull pulsed an unspoken message through every sonar ping. America remembers, and America retaliates. What came next was nothing short of cinematic, a reverse heist on the open sea. In under 10 minutes, the U.S. Navy seized what the cartel believed was untouchable. Black Hawk helicopters hovered low over the convoys, fast-roping Navy VBSS, visit, board, search, and seizure, teams onto moving decks. Every strike was coordinated to the second. No wasted bullets, no chaos, just controlled dominance. They knew exactly where to hit. Hidden compartments were uncovered beneath fuel tanks, behind engine walls, and even inside welded double hulls. Engineering feats designed to fool sonar and X-rays. Years of DEA and Navy intelligence had mapped every design. Once the panels cracked open, the truth spilled out. Wall-to-wall bales of cocaine, neatly stamped with cartel emblems and marked for delivery to ports in Spain, Miami, and Cartagena. Every package was filmed, tagged, and sealed under maritime law. The USS Cole itself became a floating courtroom, every minute documented for prosecution. Evidence teams in hazmat suits moved methodically, cataloging weight, purity, and serial tracking codes. The U.S. wasn't just intercepting, it was building a case that would collapse Sinaloa's naval branch from the top down. By dawn, the scoreboard was staggering. 76,000 pounds of narcotics were seized, $473 million in black market value, 34 high-value cartel operatives captured, including navigators, logistics chiefs, and encrypted communications officers. This wasn't the usual band of desperate smugglers. These were the architects of Sinaloa's maritime network, trained, disciplined, and trusted by the cartel's leadership. And now, they were in shackles aboard a U.S. destroyer. But here's what made Operation Pacific Viper historic. It wasn't just what they did, it was how they were allowed to do it. In early 2025, the Trump administration made a decision that flipped decades of policy on its head. It designated the Sinaloa Cartel a foreign terrorist organization. That single line of legal text changed everything. It granted the U.S. military combat authorization against cartel assets. Tomahawk-equipped destroyers could now join drug interdictions. Navy SEALs could strike smuggling hubs with the same authority used in counterterrorism raids. For the first time, narco-trafficking was treated as national security warfare, and it worked. As the Navy executed its strike at sea, the DEA launched synchronized raids across 5 continents. In Mexico, joint task forces raided fentanyl superlabs hidden in Sinaloa and Sonora. In Panama and Colombia, meth facilities were dismantled, torching billions in production capacity. In Spain and the Philippines, shell companies and crypto accounts were seized under coordinated financial operations. Behind it all was a new alliance. Pentagon precision meets DEA intelligence. Satellites tracked vessels in real time. Cyber units traced crypto wallets linked to money laundering. Financial task forces froze cartel accounts within hours of detection. For the first time in decades, Sinaloa had nowhere left to hide. Not on land, not in the air, and certainly not at sea. But the operation's shockwaves didn't stop with the seizures. Mexico's government erupted. Officials accused Washington of maritime overreach, claiming the U.S. had violated international boundaries by deploying warships so close to sovereign waters. Diplomats rushed to defuse the backlash, but the message from Washington was ice-cold and unified. A senior Navy officer, when pressed by reporters, summed it up bluntly. "We're not patrolling anymore. We're hunting." That line hit headlines around the world. It wasn't just a quote, it was a declaration of intent. For decades, America's strategy had been defensive, reactive, and restrained. But Pacific Viper proved something new. Deterrence doesn't always mean diplomacy. It sometimes means dominance. And the results spoke louder than any press briefing. Within weeks, satellite surveillance showed a sharp decline in outbound narco subtraffic. Insurance markets in the Caribbean quietly shifted as cartel-owned shipping fronts vanished. Smuggling crews abandoned half-finished subs in Colombian mangroves. Entire supply chains collapsed overnight. Economists later estimated that Sinaloa's maritime losses topped $700 million, once you factored in not just the seized narcotics, but the sunken vessels, captured crews, and shattered supply lines. Maritime intelligence officials said the hit erased nearly 18% of the cartel's annual transoceanic transport capacity. The kind of loss that doesn't just sting, it reshapes the balance of power. But the real collapse wasn't financial, it was psychological. Within days, whispers spread through encrypted networks. If the USS Cole could appear out of nowhere, what else could the Americans do? Captains started refusing orders. Crews demanded triple pay or disappeared entirely. Even veteran smugglers, men who'd braved hurricanes and gunfights, were suddenly too afraid to sail. Then came the order nobody saw coming: a maritime blackout. The Sinaloa fleet, once untouchable, was told to stand down. The Caribbean fell silent. But somewhere in that silence, U.S. surveillance still listened, because Washington knew this wasn't over. The U.S. Navy had proven it could strike anywhere, stay within international law, and still send a message heard across continents. From that night forward, deterrence wasn't a theory. It had a name, a doctrine, and a flagship: the USS Cole. And as dawn broke, the last echo of the battle faded under the rising sun. The sea looked calm again, but the game had changed forever. Because when the world's most feared cartel starts fearing the ocean itself, that's not victory, that's deterrence achieved. And somewhere deep beneath those waves, one silent truth still echoes through every radar ping and sonar sweep. America remembers, America retaliates, and this time, it's not backing down. The economic shock was devastating. Experts estimated Pacific Viper wiped out hundreds of millions in cartel assets, ships, cargo, manpower, all gone. Worse for Sinaloa, the psychological blow shattered their image of invincibility. Captains began refusing routes. Crews dumped shipments mid-sea. Rival cartels quietly negotiated to avoid confrontation. The ocean, once their safe zone, had become a trap. For decades, the Caribbean was a smuggler's playground, vast, blue, and full of escape routes. But after Pacific Viper, that illusion sank. Now, every horizon carried a shadow. Every radar ping could be a destroyer. The message couldn't be clearer. The ocean belongs to the law again. And at the center of it all was the USS Cole, the ship that turned pain into purpose. Its journey from tragedy to triumph became the defining image of America's resurgence. Analysts called it more than a bust. It was a strategic reawakening. A statement that the United States could project power, enforce law, and deter crime without crossing borders. This was deterrence reborn, not through occupation, but through precision. As the sun crept over the Caribbean, the chaos faded into silence. Coast Guard cutters drifted through the calm, their decks stacked with 76,000 pounds of seized narcotics. Cocaine, meth, and fentanyl bricks worth $473 million in black market value. Destroyers powered down their engines, their mission complete, while Navy teams cataloged every bail, logged every arrest, and transmitted encrypted reports back to Washington. But beneath that eerie calm, something fundamental had shifted. The rules of engagement were no longer the same. This wasn't the war on drugs of the past. This was Operation Pacific Viper, the first real test of America's new counter-narco warfare doctrine. Backed by the Pentagon and authorized under a foreign terrorist organization designation against the Sinaloa Cartel, the operation merged military precision with law enforcement authority. For the first time, guided missile destroyers, P-8 Poseidon aircraft, and Coast Guard tactical teams worked in seamless formation, treating cartel fleets not as smugglers, but as enemy combatants. Because when traffickers start fearing the ocean itself, deterrence has already won. Pacific Viper wasn't just a mission. It was a warning written in wake trails and searchlights. The U.S. Navy hadn't just caught the Sinaloa fleet. It had rewritten maritime warfare. The Caribbean, once ruled by smugglers, now echoes with a new kind of power: quiet, deliberate, unstoppable. And somewhere out there, beneath the dark water that once hid narco subs and go-fast boats, one truth endures: America remembers.